Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
All right, we are here for another edition of the MMA Outsiders here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, presented by Playback. It has just been an absolute, Sam, we sat down now to talk about UFC 303 and a couple other headlines here and there. You know, Usyk being stripped of the IBF officially. And then, of course, as it seems to be the luck of myself here on this network, we sit down to do the show, and then just everything manages to get upended.
Yeah, everything manages to get upended, but it would not be combat sports, and it would not be the no off-season kind of format that it is without something remotely breaking that's as crazy as some of the news that we're going to just discuss today, along with UFC 303 and so much more. I'm very, very glad to be back in my host chair. For those of you who listened to episode 89 a week ago, I was not present, even though I was present, quote unquote, when it came to the pick segment at the very end. It's not the same as directly breaking down the fights with you, Tom.
I will say, I'm very glad to have you, and that you're okay after everything that happened.
Thank you. Yeah, thankfully I'm okay. I can put it behind me. We actually just got the new car fairly recently, so I'm very, very grateful that the wheels are back in motion, if you will, both with my wheelchair and with the car. So it's good to know. And speaking of wheels in motion, the wheels are incredibly in motion when it comes to the combat sports news cycle only getting busier and busier. We don't have any formal UFC event coverage this weekend that's coming up, but we have a lot to recap and we have a lot of news and notes to get through. But before we do that, we just wanted to remind you to be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, both on YouTube and across social media at ETB Network. If you like the content that you see and you like the content that Tom and I put out, either video wise or audio wise, be sure to get the MMA Outsiders wherever you listen to your podcast. And again, be sure to subscribe, as we are slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers. So every single bit of that you share towards our show and the network really does help out the algorithm and keeps us in your feed. So we really appreciate it. And you can go to youtube.com/ETB Network. You can also go you can also go to etbpodcast.com to learn more about the network, including all of the blogs from some of our contributors, which I have the pleasure of editing most of them, so you can get all of your NFL offseason fixes and so much more, including all the other sports that we're going to have coming up as we get closer and closer to the NFL season. So stay tuned for much more on that. And then, Tom, before we get into the show and everything surrounding the show, would you like to show a little bit of love to our sponsor that's graciously given us her time throughout the network?
Yeah, well, let me go over different things. So you can listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcasts, Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so much more. To my right, as always, is Zain Bando, my great co-host. BJPen.com, MMA Knockout, The Sporting News. You can follow him at ZanBando99. I'm Tom Albano, MMA News, Fansided MMA, and doing stuff alongside the PFL. You can follow me at Thomas J. Albano. And then, of course, as you mentioned, this great network, this great show, everything about it is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together, with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. So let's get into everything about this show, because there's a lot that we have to go through. This episode kind of exploded because what else is new here at this network whenever I'm hosting? We were scheduled to lead with UFC 303, but for full context, we're recording. It's just after 6 p.m. Eastern time on Monday night, July 1st. Obviously, you guys are listening to this July 2nd and afterwards. A few minutes before we started to go on the air, Michael Chandler put it out a tweet. Now, this tweet basically talked about talks that he's had with the UFC being very productive, and the tweet ends with new date loading, which ends with an ellipses. This kind of, I don't want to say contradicts, but we talk about a whole bunch of news in the news cycle because this past week with UFC 303 alongside it was International Fight Week, which is basically there's the UFC Hall of Fame, there's the Fan Expo. It's basically like UFC's WrestleMania. And during that time, Dana White did an interview with Robbie Fox of Barstool, one of his good buddies in the media. And basically, Dana was asked by Robbie. Robbie asked him, McGregor, August, September, October. And Dana's response was, quote, none of the above.
Yeah, so definitely very interesting. So I think partially the reason why Dana said none of the above is because the supposed meeting between Chandler and UFC brass had not occurred just yet. I'm pretty sure that probably occurred hours later. And then, of course, Michael Chandler confirmed at his Saturday night UFC 303 media availability, where he spoke to the media for almost 30 minutes, that they had a very productive meeting. So this tweet almost confirms that the meeting was what Chandler said it was Saturday night when speaking to the media. And anyone who was remotely worried that this fight may never happen, there's signs of, I guess, using Ariel's phrase from a couple weeks ago, there are signs of positivity once again that this fight could potentially get remade. Obviously, I'm not holding my breath. We were just here a couple of weeks ago reacting to this fight being postponed. So obviously, you said it for over a year. I'm going to continue to say we're not going to believe it until they're literally at the weighing in for the fight. You're not going to believe it until they're actually in the cage fighting each other. I'm being a little bit more generous.
I'll actually be harsher now, Zan. I'll actually be harsher. Fine, delay the fight. Last chance. I understand injuries happen in the sport, but if an injury happens again or anything else happens, contract talks, done.
You got to scrap the fight. I agree, 1,000%. So, I mean, that kind of leads us to our discussion a couple of weeks ago. We don't fully know what the time frame of this fight could look like in terms of dates, which we're going to get into how all of this intertwines in just a minute. But just quickly, before I give my reaction, what is your reaction to this tweet, Chandler's comments from over the weekend? Him meeting with thousands of fans who traveled to see he and Conor fight. They obviously didn't get it. What do you make of everything currently going on with this fight, which still doesn't have a date, a timetable, or really even legs, so to speak?
I mean, I'm glad that he's having interactions with fans, and I'm glad he's having all this talk with fans. And he's trying to keep busy, trying to do everything and fulfilling obligations. It was supposed to be his card. I know with Brett Okamoto, Okamoto kind of described it as basically he was walking into his own funeral because just everything that was going on, as screwed up as that is. But at the same time, I mean, how I feel like this fight, so let's imagine something, Zan. Let's imagine this fight. If it's true, it's not going to be August, September, October, and it's going to be December. Are we really going to have to wait that long just for this fight? I mean, going back to what I was talking about, we haven't seen Michael Chandler fight since his loss to Poirier at 281 in Madison Square Garden. Like, is he really going to keep his career? I get it. It's Conor. I get it. It's a payday. Is he really going to keep his career off, for this long? Because think of all the fights and all the potential that he's kind of wasted chasing Conor.
Yeah, I understand your side of it, but I think obviously I'm not
blaming him for chasing Conor. I understand why he's doing it. It's just, if he loses this fight after chasing all this time, then all we're going to think of is what could have been.
No, I agree, but I think one of the reasons why I think he's still chasing it is because he probably feels like when he looks back in 20 to 30 years, when people ask him, what's the one thing about your career you're most proud of, and he's able to say that he fought Conor McGregor at that stage of his life, that's probably going to be the answer. So I think there's an unclosed chapter of his career that he feels is incomplete if he doesn't fight him. But I do understand the other side where the fans are saying, hey, you're getting up there in age. You're almost 40 years old. You fought for the title. There's other big fights out there against guys that you could realistically beat. So there's two sides to every story, but I can totally understand him sitting out and waiting for McGregor because he's still the biggest star in the UFC. He's still going to draw. He hasn't won a meaningful fight since 2016, but it seems that the interest is still there. It was going to be the biggest gate in UFC history. It ended up being the fourth biggest gate of all time, even without either of those two fighting. So there's a lot of variables at stake, but he's realizing that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and he wants to do everything he can to suck the life out of this fight potentially being made. And when asked about a deadline at the post fight, at his UFC 303 media availability, he said that a lot more clarity would be made this week. And sure enough, as I'm saying, that he obviously tweeted what we just discussed. So there's a lot at play, but I think Dana White's answer initially saying none of the above was simply because they didn't have the meeting hadn't officially happened yet. Or now that the meeting has happened, according to Chandler, I think we're going to get clarity in hopefully the next couple of days or maybe even the next week, seeing if this fight actually takes place. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Would I like to see the fight? Yeah. Am I getting sick of waiting for the fight? A little bit, but I think it adds to the intrigue. It adds to the story. And if this fight ends up going through as planned, it's going to be a fight that people will never forget, and it's going to be a spectacle. That is for damn sure.
I hope so, but at the same time, we've talked about this is not the Conor McGregor we're used to. This is a completely different Conor McGregor. He hasn't fought since the injury in 2021. He hasn't won a meaningful fight since winning the lightweight title in 2016. He hasn't won a fight since other than the knockout of Donald Cowboy Cerrone at the start of 2020. So I get it from the standpoint of that, you saw how much money that UFC 303 drew, and I think part of that was because of McGregor and the fact, I'll give my own praise to Alex Pereira a little later, like Dana White did. So Conor McGregor, I guess, still can draw. He still is somebody who can be talked about, so I get it from that standpoint. But it also comes with a major risk because, Zan, what if Michael Chandler, after all this time, all this waiting, all this chasing, what if he loses? I'll actually go one step further with that. Considering all the waiting, considering all of this talk and all the wasted potential and stuff, should the loser of this fight retire?
Yeah, 1,000%. And speaking of all the waiting, if we end up getting to November and this fight's not done, we're going to be sitting at 24 months since the last time he stepped in an octagon.
And at that point, it's just one more time and it's done. That's why as much as Dana has said this, I can't help but feel this August 31st rumor is basically what it's going to be. And that kind of connects with something else that we'll talk about. But I just, I know December has been thrown in there too, but
then
it can't wait that long.
Right. If it's December, we're back in the same position that we were a year ago where it was teased to be December and then the fight was never announced and they went with Leon Edwards, Colby Covington, and then that was that. So
it can't happen.
No. So this whole saga has dragged on for way too long. It's just like the tweet that was shown by a pretty prominent MMA fan. I'm going to butcher his username, so I won't attempt to say it, but he basically tweeted with the caption, and you've been in the same annoying relationship for 3 years, and of course it's a picture of those two. So that's the current state of what we're dealing with at the moment. There is no new date. However, according to Chandler, I guess some news is good news, and that's where we're currently at. So that remains to be seen with how the remainder of the fall schedule plays out. But speaking of the fall schedule, there's more layers and more elements that could go back to the crux of the issue, which is this very fight itself. Tom, do you want to break it down a little bit?
Yeah. So, and first of all, those of you watching the video feed, I apologize for the sudden switch in headphones. My microphone managed to die midway through this recording, so That's just how today seems to be going. So, anyways, the Sphere obviously is the big hyped event that's next with the UFC. Obviously, we do have UFC 304, 305 still coming up, but the big headline is the Sphere at this point. That was originally supposed to be UFC 306. That's supposed to feature the Tough 32 coaches fight, the trilogy between Grasso and Shevchenko. That has had a major rebranding. It is now going to be Riyadh season Noche UFC 2. Now, Noche UFC is, of course, what the Sphere events, what the Mexican Independence Day events have been known. Last year was Noche UFC. This year's supposed to be Noche UFC 2. That was supposed to be the tagline for 306. Now, Riyadh season, because of the UFC's partnership with Saudi Arabia, now Riyadh season, that tag has been added to the title because why not have Saudi Arabia sponsor a Mexican Independence Day card held in Las Vegas?
Yeah, of course. And by the way, just doing a little bit of fact checking. Unfortunately, I know the UFC's probably still figuring this out, but according to a UFC press release from 4 days ago, 4 days ago at the time that we're recording this, 5 days ago from when this will be aired, UFC names Riyadh season title partner for Epic UFC 306 at Sphere in Las Vegas, which leads me to believe that they're doing everything they can to keep UFC 306 on the tag, although that remains to be seen. So
the question, but then if the McGregor Chandler fights August 31st, then how is this going to? Or is it going to be 305 and a half?
who knows? Who knows? We are definitely playing with. If you don't know what Tom's references, he's basically saying we could potentially be getting into UFC 37 and a half territory, which is a whole nother discussion.
The first time the UFC was ever on television for a fight, which was UFC 37 and a half on, I think it was Fox Sports.
Right, it was on the Best Damn Sports Show. Perry and Robbie Lawler at Steve Berger. There's your memory bank. So, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It seemed like in the tweets, because this news kind of came out days before 303, it seemed like, according to the tweets, the 306 tag was going to be pulled off, and it was just going to be a special Noche UFC 2. That was going to be the name of the pay-per-view card. But the on-screen graphic, because they were promoting it during 303, one of the on-screen graphics did have on there UFC 306 along with the Riyadh season Noche UFC 2.
Yeah, it's very, very mysterious as to what exactly is going on with this event, but
and a card, and Dana even mentioned it at the press conference, the card hasn't been announced fully yet, other than Grasso Shevchenko 2. We have the rumors, O'Malley and Murad were kind of trying to get on this card. They didn't want Conor and Chandler on the Sphere card. There were talks about rumors of Ilya Max going on this card. Max is going to be related to another story we're going to talk about later. So there's all these moving pieces that we still got to figure out with the second half of this year.
Yeah, it's very
actually much, second half of this year, more like the third quarter.
Yeah, literally the third quarter, because we haven't even gotten into November and December yet, and that's going to be a mystery when it's in itself. But it would not be a UFC schedule conundrum if it did not involve Conor McGregor, of course, as well as several other stars we're about to get into. So how this all how all of this intertwines together is the fact that Dana White did an interview with Robbie Fox of Barstool Sports. This was late Friday post UFC ceremonial weigh-ins, and it was discussed. It was discussed during the interview. One of the final questions that Robbie Fox asked him, most of the interview was related to UFC 303 and the fighting documentary. One of the last questions that Robbie Fox asked UFC CEO and President Dana White was about Conor McGregor. He asked,
right, the September, October that we discussed before.
Right.
So, I'm just trying to figure out how to make this work, because let's imagine then August 31st isn't Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler, and 306 is what it is. Could you move 307 that was potentially aimed for Salt Lake City over to Las Vegas, and they do October 7th? But if Dana's words are true, obviously we talked about in the first segment, Dana's words being a smokescreen. But let's imagine they're true.
Okay.
So then 307 from Salt Lake City, whether it be in Salt Lake City or Las Vegas, wouldn't be it then. It's not going to be 308 with Abu Dhabi, and that's a whole other thing in itself. 309 is going to be, it seems, reserved for Jones and Stipe.
Jones and Stipe. Yeah, right. Exactly.
So then that would basically leave 310 in December, unless they do 2 December pay-per-views.
Yeah, which I don't know contractually how that all works, but that remains to be seen too. My gut feeling is they're going to try to do it in the late summer, early fall, and I think that this is all part of the this is just my theory and opinion. This is all part of the negotiations. Him saying none of the above, Chandler saying that a new date is loading. This is all planting the seed, if you will, for the inevitable, which is the rumored UFC fight night that was allegedly going to be taking place in Tampa, Florida. This is just a prediction. I'm not saying it is fact. The alleged UFC fight night that was going to take place in Tampa, Florida, I think is going to be moved to a special pay-per-view date.
Which means it would get moved to Las Vegas. I assume Tampa will get some sort of makeup card, but then the UFC 306 branding would have to be removed from Riyadh Season Noche UFC.
Right, unless they just call this card simply Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. It's finally on, or something like that. Which they
would be an old school thing.
Which they very well could. They very well could do that.
So that's going to be something that worth noting.
So what do you? Right. So what do you think? Do you think the fight happens August 31st or not? What do you think?
Then or never.
Wow, you're putting that out. So it's going to be August 31st or not at all. That's what you think.
Yeah, we can't wait till December.
Okay, I'm going to have to go on a limb and say I think it happens August 31st, but I'm prepared for anything and everything at this point because, as any of you could tell from the fighting documentary, they move minute to minute and hour to hour. So you never know. Well, maybe after this podcast releases, shit hits the fan once again.
Of course, so, that would just be my luck, now wouldn't it?
Of course.
Okay, let's get to 303 because we're already about a half hour into the show. So let's get into 303. Alex Pereira, Yuri Prochazka. I mean, it delivered. It didn't last as long as last time. It actually went shorter, but they still managed to deliver the two of them. Alex Pereira, Yuri Prochazka. It started off very quiet like their first fight. Pereira using the leg kicks. And then all of a sudden, 1-2 right before the bell, and Yuri Prochazka goes down. He's able to get up on his feet, but he's very wobbly. And you still see him wobbly as he makes his way out for round 2. One head kick and some follow-up shots later, Alex Pereira retains the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. For the second time in the span of just under 3 months, he fills in on short notice and retains a championship. I mean, the last time, Zain, that I can think of somebody taking title fights, main event title fights on short notice and doing what he's done with it, like, you have to go back to, like, the Tito Ortiz days for that.
Yeah, you have to go back to the Tito Ortiz days, and you can even go back to when TJ Dillashaw was champion and fighting Joe Soto on a day's notice.
Yeah.
Still successfully defending.
And the thing is, Zain, these two technically had a short notice main event at 295 as well. They were scheduled to be the co-main event. Then Jon Jones tears his pec and they get elevated.
Yeah, it's a wild turn of events, and it was almost like it was divine intervention. Like it was always meant to be this way. I have to say, the theatrics leading up to this fight, especially the entrance and the stare down, just still
4.5 minutes, nearly a full round.
Still gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, I know I wasn't alive during the 90s Tyson era. You were, I think, partially for it, or you were very young at the time, but it almost reminded me of those old Mike Tyson videos where he'd be fighting Bruno, or he'd be fighting somebody on his way up, and just the stare down was more intimidating than the fight itself. And it's sort of what it felt like. I mean, I'm just gonna put it to you point blank. Alex Pereira is one of the biggest stars that the UFC has ever had in the modern era. I think I feel very comfortable saying that.
I think, Zan, I mean, just a simple fact that you kind of mentioned, because you were at a Buffalo Wild Wings, you were watching this card with multiple TVs. You said that you saw on the ESPN network feed the entrances and the stare down and everything.
They showed the whole thing. It was unreal. It was unreal. I could not believe what I was watching, that the linear ESPN of places, the non-pay-per-view version, was showing everything leading up to the fight, with the fight literally starting minutes later. It was insane.
Yeah. And just the simple fact of that. Plus, just like 300, they aired the Alex Pereira knockout. Like, they put it on the social media feeds. They put it on the UFC YouTube. It was everywhere. Like,
it's everywhere.
And the fact that Alex Pereira did all this.
That's happened 3 times now. First, it happened with O'Malley, and now twice with Pereira. Unreal. In the same year.
And the fact, Zan, you've got Pereira doing all that he did, in terms of filling in on short notice. The fact that he's only 9 fights into his UFC run, and he's the champion of 2 different he's been the champion of 2 different weight classes. He's doing things, we talked about how short of an impact Brock Lesnar had, becoming UFC heavyweight champion, just his 3rd MMA fight. The fact that Pereira is doing all of this, plus after dominating and becoming a champ in another discipline, in kickboxing.
It's wild stuff. And just
you see the numbers.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because you see the numbers of UFC 300. Now, granted, people buy the milestone pay-per-views. Granted, right. UFC 303, people were going to buy it, and people have purchased tickets and everything for Conor McGregor. But so few refunds, and all of this surrounding Pereira. He's a superstar. At this point, there's no question.
No question about it whatsoever. And something that's even remotely fascinating is just the fact that, like, he knows how to captivate people. He has his toe snap out. He snaps his toe again. He gets right back at it at sparring on Monday morning. Like, the dude is literally from another dimension. He almost reminds me of just something straight out of the Matrix. Like, he is someone that, like, is one of these cartoon characters / like video game characters that's like a literal a literal real life Mortal Kombat. I mean, he is that just mesmerizing and devastating. And I've never revealed this until now, but I saw him from a far distance at PFL Chicago. He was there cornering some of the fighters on the card, and just seeing his presence briefly was just so shocking. Like, he's big.
He has an aura to him.
He's massive in person. Let me just put it to you simply. The guy is a freak of nature, no matter what he does. And considering that he was changing tires at 12 years old after dropping out of school and literally not a single cent to his name, it's pretty remarkable. When him beginning to live in the gym at 21 years old and doing what he's been able to do in the last 10 years, it's unreal. Like, this is the stuff that movies are made about. Like, this guy is a literal real life movie Rocky style story. Like, it's literally
I kind of like your first comparison better. He's like a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat character come to life. It's unbelievable. He is something straight out of a video game. And I want to give credit to Yuri too, because he stepped up on short notice too. You talk about 2 guys with warrior auras around them. It's these 2. Like, as much as this fight, obviously a trilogy fight's not going to happen, but I would still be down for it.
Oh, of course. And not to mention, this is somewhat related but unrelated at the same time. A UFC event is big when 5 of your non-UFC friends are texting you, asking you if you saw the Pereira fight from the night before. That's when you know the man is a superstar.
I think we're gonna see those face statues all around now with how much of a star he is. And as I tweeted out, I don't think I love Joe Pyfer, but I think maybe we replace Joe Pyfer with Jama now.
Yeah, I guess we're a part of the Shama army now, aren't we?
This used to be a Jiri household, and now it's Shama.
Unreal. Great fight. Much respect to Yuri for showing as much respect as he possibly could. And I think just really briefly, based on his post-fight comments, I think he's putting himself down a little bit too much. I mean, he's literally in there with one of the best fighters in the entire world. I don't think his skills have to evolve necessarily. He simply just needs to go back to the drawing board, figure out what went wrong. He's still one of the best light heavyweights in the world. He'll be back. What do you think?
Yeah, he'll be back. I think, I understand why he feels the way he feels, because with a dominant champion like Alex Pereira, maybe the opportunity at this point at light heavyweight is locked. But, who knows? Maybe if they allow him to go up to heavyweights, which I know there's all this hubbub about that, but
Then it opens the potential planted seed for the fight that the UFC doesn't want to make. But that's another story for another day.
we'll talk about that when we talk about Jon Jones later, because we still have to talk about him. Let's talk about.
I actually wasn't going there with that. I meant that if Pereira moves up to heavyweight, you could realistically do Prochaska versus Ankalaev, which is a fight that I'm sure the UFC would not be too down for.
Well, I mean, Ankalaev seems to be the number one contender at light heavyweight now, according to the sports books and media and everything. But Dana hates him.
I know. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, we gotta talk about. If we're gonna talk about warriors, we're gonna talk about BMFs. Dan Ige, the fact that he takes a fight on 4 hours' notice. Full context for those of you who missed 303. Brian Ortega actually ends up falling ill. It's originally supposed to be a featherweight. When you texted me that it was a lightweight bout, I said, "Oh, did we screw something up?" And no, they just moved it to a lightweight bout right before the weigh-ins. They woke Diego Lopez up out of his sleep, basically all for nothing, just to rehydrate for him to make the 155. And then it becomes really all for nothing because Ortega gets 103-degree fever. He's out. Dan Ige is in Vegas. They have his medicals in Las Vegas because he fought in Las Vegas in February.
And he trains there too.
He trains there, lives there. He was also going to fight on July 20th. And he's basically raises his hand, and somehow, I can't believe this, the commission allowed it to happen.
At a catch weight, nonetheless.
165 pounds. So Lopez had to, rehydrate again and weigh in again.
On 5 hours' notice. Unreal.
Oh my God. The fact that this whole pay-per-view was a roller coaster going up to there, and it still was a roller coaster the day of the event. Like, you want to talk about just the luck of this card. This was what this card all summed up was.
Yeah, you want to talk about the bottom lettering of a ticket saying subject to change, and then some. Because I'm not joking. When this news broke, and I texted a buddy that Brian Ortega wasn't fighting anymore, he goes, "Zan, are you pranking me? WTF? What are you talking about?"
I'm texting you all caps, screaming about all this.
Was I the one to break it to you that the fight was off?
No, but I'm in the middle of since we MMA news, we have a little Slack chat, and when someone points it out, the tweeting that's going out with Eric Nissick and Ali and Dan himself, I'm like, we're all like, what the hell is going on?
Unreal.
It is the most unreal thing I've ever seen in the history of MMA. I mean, you want to talk about moment of the year?
Oh,
this is it. This is
the only moment. Well, minus maybe Holloway Gaethje.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, we talk about Alex Pereira having potentially maybe wrapped up fighter of the year, even though it's only the start of July. Dan Ige has given himself a end of the year award all by himself just by doing this.
Oh, for sure. And could you imagine if he still fights July 20th and wins July 20th? That would be something.
Is he still on for July 20th?
Yes, they want to still make it happen. Yes. Yeah.
And the sick part is he lost this fight. He won round 3.
I know.
Imagine if he had won one of the other rounds, or if he had finished Lopez in the third.
Would have screwed up the entire spectrum, my friend. The entire spectrum.
This is insane. So, I mean, big win for for Diego Lopez. It's a win for Danny Ige, even though he didn't get his hand raised. And for Lopez, I mean, at this point, the fact that he took a fight on 3 weeks' notice
and was
then
still going to get paid, even if he didn't fight. He was still going to get paid.
Weighed in weighed in twice, was going to do like 3 different weight, featherweight, and then all of a sudden they changed to lightweight, and then they changed to 165. At this point, Diego Lopez, I said that a win over Brian Ortega would do for Diego Lopez.
He's a star right now. He's a star right now.
What he and Dan Ige just did, like Lopez got more out of this fight, I think, than any win over Brian Ortega could have done.
So I have to ask you, do you think at a proper weight of lightweight, they try to rebook Ortega versus Lopez for September 14th?
At a proper, or do you mean featherweight?
Meaning a lightweight.
No. I think what Diego Lopez has done, and remember, it was only lightweight because Brian Ortega asked for lightweight on last minute notice. I think what Lopez has done.
I know, but he's planning to move to lightweight anyway, so that's why.
Then no, because look what Diego Lopez just did here. And like I just said, I think he got more out of this and the aftermath of this than unless he had gotten a spectacular knockout over Ortega. At this point, forget about Ortega. I mean, but then again, Ortega is number 3.
See, that's what I'm trying to get at too. That he was still top 3 in the world. Yeah.
At this point, give us Lopez versus Volkanovski.
Jeez, man, that would be the twist of 2024 that not a single person in the world would have been on her bingo card, and if you did, you were lying about that.
No, I mean it's tough because
not you. I mean the public.
I know, but the situation that he's in. I mean, unless you do Diego Lopez, Yair Rodriguez.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
That's a former interim champion.
Yair needs a fight, so I'm down for it.
There you go. I think I may have just figured out the solution, all and it's 5 seconds in my head.
Shoot, if the UFC sees this and books the fight, then you get all the credit. So
I will dance if that happens. Not on the air.
Okay, good. All right, let's move on.
Speaking of more short notice stuff, Roman Dolidze takes up less than a week's notice, and he ends up beating. I mean, I get it. People were a little down on Anthony Smith, but people doubted him in this fight. And, I get it wasn't the most exciting of fights, the most exciting performances, but come on. The man took a fight on days' notice and freaking won.
Unreal.
In a weight class that he doesn't even belong to.
I know. I just feel bad for Anthony Smith because now looking back, it was too quick of a turnaround. He had just fought a couple weeks prior and had won. I feel like he's the biggest loser in this situation. Dolidze, obviously, his stock rises, in my opinion, because he beat a name in Anthony Smith that's been in MMA forever. But man, if you're Anthony Smith, you're in a really tough spot with what you want to do next.
I think Roman's in a little bit of a tough spot too, though, because now what do? Do you move up to light heavyweight off of the momentum of this win?
I think it's going to be whatever he feels he wants to do is what the UFC will let him do, in my opinion. That's what I think, because he's in one of those. In other words, to me, he's in one of those positions where he doesn't lose either way. That's what I think.
Basically, the world has become his oyster after this win, and now basically the UFC says, "Okay, we owe you one. What do you want to do?"
Yeah, something tells me he's going to eventually fight on the Paris card, given his international prowess. What do you think?
I could see that. I could see that being next for him.
Who would you like to see him fight? Assuming that he stays at 185, what do you think?
Assuming he stays at 185, let's bring up the rankings because he has a couple of losses in the top. That's the thing. He has a couple of losses to some top guys, so we haven't really seen him get a win in, a big position. He's lost to Nasruddin, right? Imavov. He's lost to him.
Yeah.
Actually, though, oh, but wait, Imavov got the win in his last fight, so he's not going to fight down. Otherwise, I would have said a Dolise Imavov rematch would be something. And Roman's only ranked number 10. Could you go either Roman Dolise versus Brendan Allen or do a rematch with Vettori?
I could see that, but what about a bit of a curveball? What if you do Roman Dolise versus Ikram Aliskerov?
Again, I mean, that's funny. That's great. But again,
anything's possible, right?
Anything is possible, but is Roman going to fight down for his next fight if it's at middleweight?
I don't know. That's the thing.
And then if you put him at and then let's say he goes up to light heavyweight, he's going to be ranked number 10 at least. One thing that interests me was Khalil Roundtree Jr., but he might, we don't know what his suspension is going to be like after the accidental ingesting.
You know what? I think he should fight Volkan Oezdemir next if he goes up to light heavyweight. That's what I think.
Yeah, I would say Volkan Oezdemir unless they used Olise to finish off Johnny Walker.
They could because he's technically one of these young up and coming prospects. They very well could.
Honestly, I don't know what directive they would want to give him the winner, which would be Oezdemir, or the loser, which would be Walker, but one of those two, honestly, could be who I'd put Roman against at light heavyweight.
At least what we know right now is Roman Dolise is in the mix of two different weight classes, which is wild to say.
If you had that on your bingo card at the start of the year, you
didn't. You did not. No way. It's really quick before we move on to this. From this, do you think that Anthony Smith considers the R word and goes further into his UFC broadcasting ventures?
I was going to say, I thought he already was, considering he was at this point being a broadcaster. I mean, it's tough because at this point he's going to drop out of the top 10. I think maybe he does one more fight and that's it.
Yeah, well, then the fight that you do, I think, is Dominic Reyes. That's what I think.
All right.
What do you think?
It seems vicious to say, but you know what? I mean, Reyes hasn't been the same. He got his first win since 2019 recently. So
yeah, I just feel like they're both in similar positions, so the fight makes sense.
Fair enough. Also at the 303 man card, Macy Chiasson getting a brutal win over Mara Buenasilva. What did you think of the stoppage? Because I thought
it was good stoppage.
It was a good stop. Did you see how much blood was trickling down and how deep that cut was?
Nasty cut.
That was a big one off the elbow. I understand why she was complaining and everything, but I mean, somebody on Twitter kind of said it. If we stopped Diaz versus Masvidal at 244 for the kind of cut that Diaz had, you had to stop this one.
1000%. And Chiasson was on her way to winning that fight anyway, even before that cut. So it's not like the fight would have really changed, in my opinion. I mean, she had MBS in a dominant position anyway. I wouldn't have foreseen that fight going any different.
I mean, I get the argument of MBS winning round one, but like you said, she was in mount, or near mount. She was getting ready for ground and pound. It looked like Chiasson was going to finish her off in that second round, if not early third.
Oh, 1000%. And, something else to keep in mind too, like, it's not like she was, being overly blasted on the feet or anything. She was basically doing whatever she wanted to MBS, and that fight was only going one way, and that was going to be a Chiasson win no matter what. So,
and now, even though you can make the argument about MBS's merits, if she deserved the last fight when she fought for the title and how that played out, you can't deny now she has a win over a former title challenger. So that just rose her stock up a bunch.
I think you run back Chiasson versus Aldana. What do you think?
I could see that. And then whoever wins that fight might be next at 135 after they figure out everything with Kayla.
Yeah, which Kayla is chomping at the bit for a fight. We'll see what.
That's the thing. We don't know what's going on at 135 because we assumed the next one was going to be Raquel versus Pena, but it seems like more and more that as time goes on, it feels like Kayla is going to get the next shot.
Yeah, I have a good feeling too, which, in my opinion, she deserves. I mean, she's done everything she's ever wanted to do in other organizations, and that you obviously are very prominently involved with. And I
also a two-time judo medalist at the Olympics.
Yeah, and it's kind of a stud in her own right, in her own discipline. So, yeah, I mean, this to me is the easiest next title shot that you could possibly give someone. Or, you know what? This may be too far fetched, but I know. Oh, I know she's coming off a loss and stuff, but you know, maybe one of these fights to build up Chia-san as a legitimate contender is you give her Holly Holm and see if she can beat Holly Holm, and then it's like, oh, okay, now she's really ready for a title shot after beating a former champion. You never know. So
that too. I mean, you know, Holly Holm is unfortunately seems like kind of on the way down, but maybe you get that win, and now you, like you said, now she has a win over two former title challengers, one of whom was a former champion, and that gives Chiasson all that credibility. Like I said last week, you know, Chiasson may not have the same glitter around her that she did coming out of her win of the Ultimate Fighter, but she still has plenty in the bank, and you know, I think Zan, and I kind of talked about it during some articles I was writing for MMA News.
okay,
I think that year and a half or so layoff that Chiasson had, she needed it, and I think she was able to grow during it.
right, and I'm sure she's chomping at the bit to fight Raquel at some point because she knows that she's improved since that loss. So I'm sure that if she was offered Raquel at any point, that she would totally take that fight.
But based on what we just said, you know what? At this point, maybe do run that Aldana fight back.
You never know. But at least what we do know is she's very much in the mix in the crowded division that's still figuring a lot of stuff out. That's been in kind of its lull of inconsistency, similar to light heavyweight. So maybe bantamweight can get back to what it once was. There also is the outlier, maybe to mention that the Amanda Nunes could very well come back and spice things up, which would make things very, 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 very interesting. So you never know.
But if Amanda comes back, you know, considering how Pena's been towards her since retiring, do you do that fight again? Do you deal with that trilogy instead?
I mean, I think you'd have to because there's unfinished business. So,
because I know you know, somebody like Nunes would maybe only come back for the title shot or that dream fight against Kayla, but I'm wondering if Nunes, part of her, would rather first take a fight with Pena just to shut her up.
oh, I think she would totally be down for that. Especially if the UFC makes Pena go to Nunes' backyard to fight her. That would be nuts too. You never know. So
fair enough. And then of course, opening up the main card, Ian Gary MVP.
I've seen enough. Give me Ian Gary in Dublin, Ireland as the main event on a fight night against Jack Della Maddalena. It has to happen. I've seen enough. I've seen enough.
Seen enough in a good way or a bad way?
In a good way. I like Ian Gary. A ton of people don't. I think he's exciting. He's only scratched the surface of his potential. I love him. I've seen enough. Give him a main event in Dublin, Ireland. Everybody wants to see that.
I think he's great. I think I would be fine with that kind of matchup, but I wouldn't use that matchup as a contenders fight because I still feel like
I agree. That would be a stepping stone fight to see if he could really compete against the best in the world.
I was gonna say because Ian Gary, I mean, he did well in this fight, but I feel like I feel the same way as I did against, maybe a little better, when he fought Magny and Jeff Neal. There's more there. He's still capable of more. He needs to show a little more.
But hey, you got to admit, with the absence of Conor McGregor, with Irish MMA, still
Ian Gary basically is Ian Gary and Paddy Pimblett.
He's yeah, absolutely. But specifically for Irish MMA, Ian Gary's the guy. So I know there's a lot of controversy around him about that he does outside of the cage, but I think he's someone that the UFC needs because he knows how to market himself, and he knows how to talk, and he knows what he wants.
Well, here's what I'm going to say on the Ian Gary front, though, because I may not be as big of a fan as you are, but if we're going to criticize Ian Gary for this fight, I mean, MVP, man, 2 fights into the UFC run, and this has been a disappointment.
True, he has, and we thought that this was going to be a striker's delight, and it was anything but
I didn't. I actually feared last week. I said I actually feared that this was going to end up as a grapple fest, and
you were right. How did you know that?
Because it's not so much about Ian Gary. It's not so much about Ian Gary. It's about Michael Page, because with Michael Venom Page, this goes only one of 2 ways with him. Either he delivers a highlight reel, big time knockout, or it's a hug fest. It goes only one of 2 ways.
I know.
I think at this point, MVP has his UFC credentials. He's had the career that he's had. I think he's going to come after me for saying this, but I think the fire's been lost a little bit.
I think you're sort of mistaken, because the one thing you're forgetting to mention is he's still 22-3. So he's still globally one of the best welterweights in the world. He just hasn't shown it on the biggest stage yet.
He hasn't.
No, he hasn't. And
at this point,
it's almost like a Hector Lombard experiment. When Hector Lombard came into the UFC, everybody thought that he was going to be this next middleweight contender, and he was far from that.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like at this point, Sam, what we're potentially looking at, maybe we need a situation. The thing about the MVP gets a lot of criticism for, especially with that early run with Bellator, was getting fed a lot of tomato cans. You got to set MVP up with an opponent that will allow him to have this striker's delight. And, at that point, it becomes last chance. And if MVP doesn't deliver, then it's going to be a bust.
Right.
So everyone's calling for MVP versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but it seems like both sides don't want to do it.
I don't want to see that fight, because it'll go one of 2 ways. It's either going to be a highlight reel knockout, or they're going to clinch against one another, and it's going to be boring.
Like I just said.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, going back to my original point. Mm-hmm. Ian Gary to Dublin, Ireland. They have to strike with the irons hot. They owe Dublin as much as they can give them, considering that the press conference was canceled. Okay.
I know. Well, I'll give you let me play a little devil's advocate.
All right.
Do you wait a little bit, because Paddy Pimblett is fighting at the pay-per-view at the end of the month, and you book Ian Gary and Paddy Pimblett on the same card?
Oh, 1,000%, yeah. And you do it at Madison Square Garden. That's what I think.
Oh.
You convince Paddy Pimblett to fight in New York. That's what I
So you would have them do New York before Dublin?
Yeah, I would. Then if Ian Gary wins that fight, you go to Dublin. Yeah.
Oh man, that would be something else. And then obviously don't have a banner for it. We're focused on the main card with everything we got going on right now. But shout out Joe Pyfer, one of the most brutal knockouts of the night.
Fantastic. Nice to see him get back into the win column.
I can't believe he did that to Barriol. Barriol has a solid chin and has all that power behind him.
I know. But sometimes in MMA you get caught, and that's exactly what happened. So
yeah.
Sometimes these things happen. Right on cue.
All right. Speaking of right on cue, speaking of moments that are happening, I talked about before that Michael Chandler tweet that dropped a little bit before we started recording. Well, hours before we started recording, Dustin Poirier dropped a tweet of his own saying, "I might not be done. Uno mas."
Yeah, which I can say this in an interview that will be released later this July. Dustin Poirier did confirm to me that he is not retired. So this could have something to do with it, which is very much promising. And that one more fight that he's trying to tease is yet again the inevitable, the 4th fight with the notorious Conor McGregor, which at press time, unless Tom can correct me, I don't believe Conor McGregor has responded
Not that I can see.
To those
Not that I can
tweets,
see.
right? Okay. This kind of goes back to the very beginning. Could you imagine if the UFC just moves on and decides, hey, Poirier versus McGregor is the fight. We're moving on. Would you be surprised?
If they say McGregor Poirier 4?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of unfinished business. So, and Poirier, has had a little run of his own, and he's coming off that loss to Islam. I would probably be more interested in that fight.
I would be too. Let me just put it to you that way. No disrespect to Chandler McGregor, the Ultimate Fighter, but if we're going to be dragging that one on too long, I think that is a bigger backstory than Chandler McGregor.
Although I might have another one if you want to talk about running it back.
Okay, go for it. What do you got?
One of the biggest comeback performances in 2020 belonged to Dustin Poirier when he went down 2 rounds and then came back 3 strong to defeat Dan Hooker. Could you maybe interested in seeing Poirier Hooker too?
Well, I like that, but I think we're obviously not casual supporters of the sport. I think from a casual fan perspective, they would not be excited to see that.
Fair enough. I mean, do you run Poirier Gaethje 3?
I would love
since they're both coming off losses.
I would love to see that fight, and I would also potentially love to see Poirier versus Holloway, depending on what Holloway's next steps are, because he's technically the BMF, so that would be interesting in itself too.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that situation in just a bit. But actually, you know what? We're going to a couple of different situations right now.
Well, I'm being dumb. They fought once before. It would be a fantastic rematch. But you know what I mean.
I know. But let's talk about some of those situations that are coming up, because we talked about it with the lightweight and we talked about it with Jon Jones. Let's start with the lightweight end. So the belief was that Arman Tsarukyan was going to be next in line to receive a title shot against Islam Makhachev. And the belief was, according to media and according to Dana at the 302 press conference, it was going to be Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan, UFC 308, October 26 in Abu Dhabi. There seems to be a bit of an issue, though, because Arman Tsarukyan, he got this title shot off the win of Charles Oliveira at UFC 300. In his entrance, you saw him get into it with a fan. Well, and you saw him throw. Well, apparently the NSAC did not like that. It has now suspended him 9 months. He can't reduce this suspension to 6 months if he participates in an anti-bullying PSA. But that sparks one of 2 questions. One, can the UFC still promote, book, etc., everything with Arman under suspension? Because if he participates in the PSA, then it's 6 months. That would get him back in time for October 26th to fight. Number 2, with the suspension, did the UFC decide to change plans anyway, regardless of what happens?
I think it's the latter and not the former. I think with how quickly the UFC's business moves, the rankings at this point don't matter. Is Arman deserving of the next title shot? 1,000%. But the suspension has to go through and work out its process first before you even remotely start thinking about an Islam fight, even though it doesn't make sense from a fan perspective because everybody's excited to see that fight. You have to take care of quote unquote legal or governmental.
We should clarify. That point is mute if Arman refuses to do the PSA. If he refuses to do the PSA, then he's out till January. He's out the year. Which, if he refuses to do the PSA, then he doesn't deserve the title shot. Because how are you going to let a title shot slip over not taking a day out to record some anti-bullying PSA? They're giving you the gift of getting back in the cage sooner and potentially competing in Abu Dhabi. If he refuses, that's got to be one of the most baffling and stupid decisions by a fighter I would have ever seen. The question, however, just becomes then, what do you do if you're the UFC?
You move and you move fast. You figure out who's available, who's healthy, and you don't really look at wins and losses at that point. You look at merit and you look at the biggest fight you can make with the fighters you have available, which only leaves a couple of options.
Yeah, that's the thing. we talk about lightweight being so full of options and so full of talent, but one by one, they're starting to really slip away, considering the quick turnaround. Because let's clarify, as it seems to be the original plan, they had talked about a couple of other fights potentially headlining 305 or 30 or 308, one of whom was Alex Yuri too. But because of the moves needed for 303, 308, there's no choice. It has to be Islam. At this, and especially considering Hamzat Chimaev, we don't know what the hell his future is going to be like.
No, we don't.
So let's say Arman's out. Number 2 is Charles Oliveira. He was owed a rematch, and he was supposed to fight him before the cut suffered last year, which led to the Volkanovski rematch.
That's probably gonna end up being the fight. If there is any fight, that'll probably end up being the fight is Islam Oliveira, the rematch we never got.
Because then, sorry, Zain, just to full clarification, 1 through 6 as of Monday. So this is before the new rankings come out. 1 through 6 at lightweight is Arman, Charles, Gaethje, Poirier, Gamrot, Chandler.
What sucks is all of those guys except for one, if my math is correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, all of those guys except for one are coming off a loss.
Yeah.
And the only one who isn't is Mateos, which is crazy to think about. But
yeah, but I think you and I can agree Mateos isn't really ready for a title shot.
I don't think so either.
So
he needs one more big win, and then obviously he lost to Arman. So
at this point, it's either you go with Charles Oliveira and you give him his rematch, even though technically he lost it at 300, or you go to Michael Chandler and say, look, you've been chasing him for so long. I know you're coming off a loss. You haven't fought in a while. We're in desperation. We'll give you a title shot if you stop the corner chase.
The big issue is I think fans would give the UFC crapola because what people fail to forget it is Michael Chandler's UFC record is 2-3. So
fair, but devil's advocate.
Okay.
What if that happened and then UFC said, to make it up to you, to the fans, to make it up to Conor, and for Dustin Poirier for his last fight, we do Conor Poirier 4.
Yeah, that's a fair compromise then, I think.
And maybe you give Chandler a little bonus for all the wasted time.
Oh, I think he's going to get paid. Yeah, or at least I would hope so. So, What I think is going to happen though is the first logical choice, which is to do Oliveira.
I think so too.
I mean, he wasn't knocked out. He wasn't submitted. He lost a relatively close fight. His cut is obviously healed from last year. I think that's the fight you do.
Yeah, I think there's no choice on that.
Because think about it. Poirier's already lost. That was his third shot at a lightweight title. You know that Conor McGregor is not going to get the fight because he never fights, right? And you also know too that Justin Gaethje, because of political decisions made that were not out of his control due to the management that he works for that I'd rather not name, he kind of shot himself in the foot by taking the Holloway fight and losing in upset fashion with seconds to go in the 5th round. So I think that really only gives you one option, because think about this, Tom. If that Holloway Gaethje fight doesn't happen, he gets the fight.
The title shot, yeah. And honestly, I get they could do Islam versus Max, but if I'm Max Holloway, I know Max Holloway it is what it is, anywhere, anytime. If I'm Max Holloway and I've already matched up Ilya and people are scared that Max is going to beat Ilya, you have the chance to get the featherweight title that you never got because you lost to Bolt 3 times. I don't think you can give that up.
I don't think you can either. Especially going to a division he barely ever fights in, and that's not his natural.
And that he looks better with the Gaethje fight than the Poirier fight. But when I'm saying this, the 2 times he fought at 155, he's small for that class.
He is. So yeah, I think if you're the UFC matchmakers, you have a simple choice to make again, this is assuming that he doesn't do the anti-bullying PSA. If he does do it, the wheels are in motion to make the fight whenever he's ready to go. So there's still options, but the clock is ticking. I know we're only on July 1st, the day that we're recording this, but the middle of October is going to be here before you know it. So you never know.
All right, let's get to this one. So perhaps the biggest thing that came out of the 303 aftermath wasn't involving any of the fighters. It was involving Jon Jones, because Dana White, I mean, I watched the post-fight press conference, and
I did
man, he spent more time talking about Jon Jones, it seemed, than any of the fighters on the show.
I know you want to talk about Dana White defending Jon Jones, the same guy that was that 3 years ago said that Jones should consider going to middleweight.
All right, so full context.
I'm just saying it's quickly how things can shift and change.
I know. Let's play some of the audio from that press conference. For full context, this is Dana White getting into it with he was a long time with Kevin Iole.
Kevin Iole, formerly of Yahoo Sports, now with his own website.
Kevin and him had a very good relationship with.
They still do. I think they just got into a little bit of a spat. But yeah, this is Kevin Iole, formerly of Yahoo Sports, currently with his own website, KevinIole.com.
I get it. I'm not criticizing.
He was trying to fight.
I'm just saying, yeah.
Well, it's not like he's sitting around and doesn't want to fight. The guy came to fight. It's the first injury he's ever had. And listen to me. I'm not defending Jon Jones. You know what I mean? Jon Jones has been one of my biggest headaches in the entire time that I've been in this company, right? And, you know, the guy hasn't been the model, fighter in the company. No matter what you think of Jon Jones, he's the best ever, and he's the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. And he's the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world.
Yeah. Well, except that he hasn't fought in the last year, so he's not.
Because he got hurt. He got injured.
But if you don't...
If you were coming into a fight and you fucking got hurt, that means you're not the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world anymore? How does that even make sense? It doesn't make sense.
When he fights...
Right? If he was sitting out and fucking getting arrested and running around or whatever, and you're like, well, Jon Jones is inactive, I'd say, maybe you're right. But as an educated adult who knows the fight business, you cannot deny that while Jon Jones is active, he is the greatest fighter in the world.
Did I not say that?
Yes. I don't know what you're arguing about here. I don't even know how we're in this conversation. Where are the helicopters when you need them?
Because you're...
And there were a lot of helicopters, if you noticed, at that press conference.
There were. That press conference sounded like an air hangover or something like that. But back to the context at hand. So basically, the original question from Kevin Iole was about potentially a super fight between Alex Pereira and Jon Jones at heavyweight, and Dana White proceeds to go on some crazy rant when another reporter asked another question regarding his current stance on the pound-for-pound rankings. I think that was Mike Bond of MMAJunkie.com who asked that follow-up question, which is when absolutely crazy when Kevin Iole tried to follow up there as well. But this was a very interesting and heated exchange. I can see both sides. I think when you look at the pound-for-pound argument, I definitely think that Jon Jones is the greatest pound-for-pound fighter ever. But when you talk about activity, Islam Makhachev has been arguably the most active champion over the last several years. So at this current juncture in time, I think that currently Islam Makhachev is pound-for-pound number one currently at the moment. But all time, Jones for sure. Those two things can't be overstated. But for you to tell me that a guy that barely fights and has one fight in the last 3 years is considered the current pound-for-pound best fighter in the world is downright ridiculous and insane. That's what I think. And again, this is not discounting anything that Jon Jones has done throughout his career, but at this current moment right now, he's not number one.
Well, Zain, this brings up to me two questions. One, so you don't count any of the out of the cage stuff, and you would put Jon Jones above GSP.
Yeah, I would. I don't count any of that. I'm just looking strictly at what he's done in the cage in my mind, he's never lost in the UFC, and that is to count for something.
Right.
And he's been in the UFC for over 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what he's been able to do. So,
okay. And number two,
or excuse me, for over a decade. What am I saying? Not 20 years, 10 plus years is what I meant to say.
I know. We've had a long recording session, so we're both kind of out of it. Number two, though, brings up the thought of look, I like Islam a lot, but he's defended the title 3 times. 2 of those times have come against a featherweight in Alex Volkanovski. One of which Volk was on short notice, on like 10 days notice. And number 2, the third title defense was last month against Dustin Poirier. And Dustin Poirier, I love Dustin so much. He's one of my favorites, but he's tail end his career. He hasn't defended against any of these in their prime lightweights, Gaethje and Gamrot. So I need to see what comes with that. I would have been tempted if in October, and he beat Arman. Then I would say, yeah, maybe Islam pound for pound best now. Right now, look, all time, I see the argument for Jones. For right now, though, I go neither. Neither Jones nor Islam. I think, you ready for this one?
Yeah, I am.
I think, given all that he's done, all the short notice stuff, all the fact that he's dominated 2 disciplines and 2 weight classes in 2 disciplines, I go Alex Pereira. I think with what he's done, and especially with the exclamation mark that was 303, I think he's jumped both of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far just yet. I still somewhat agree with Dana when he says that there are other challengers at light heavyweight that he could still fight. There is the heavyweight.
Okay, but then why not use that same argument with his?
Hang on. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna try to break this down in the best way that I can. The reason why I think Islam Makhachev is at this very moment the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world is a twofold reason. Number 1, he beat the consensus greatest 145er of all time. You could say the first fight was controversial, it counts as a win. He viciously knocked out Oleksandr Volkanovski. He dominated Dustin Poirier, the best uncrowned champ that arguably lightweight has ever seen. Alex Pereira, hang on, I'm almost, and I promise. Last I checked, Alex Pereira is 1-1 in MMA against Israel Adesanya. Last I checked, Jon Jones' last opponent, which took him 3 years to move to heavyweight. I give him all the credit in the world. That's a big move. His
Cyril Gane. Yeah,
his lone win, Cyril Gane, is 2-2 in his last 4. What does that tell you? Cyril Gane at that particular point in time in my,
I actually understand your argument.
Hang on. I'm almost finished. Cyril Gane at that particular point in time, the UFC can make you believe whatever you want. Cyril Gane at that moment in time was not the best heavyweight in the world, and everybody knows that.
But one problem I will have with your argument is calling Alex Volkanovski the greatest consensus featherweight in the world.
He was at that time he was, and a lot of people.
You would rank him above Jose Aldo and Max Holloway.
I would, yeah. He beat both of them. Yeah, absolutely. He beat both
despite
of them.
The fact that Aldo reigned in that division for he hadn't lost in a decade, and he had reigned in that division.
I would say so simply because he was fighting in the WEC before that.
What does the WEC have to do with that?
Because the WEC wasn't fully owned by the UFC yet. Okay. I consider.
Oh no! Hang on, you listen to me.
Okay,
but the UFC was not home to any lighter weight classes other than lightweight at that time. You can't penalize against Aldo.
I'm not penalizing. I'm just simply telling you that what he did in the UFC, and he eventually lost to the guys that I just mentioned. I think you could call any of those 3 guys the best featherweights of all time, and nobody would have an issue with it. But you can't. and discount what Alexander Volkanovski has done.
And I'm not. And I'm not.
Okay, so what are you?
I'm just talking about legacy.
So why? So I don't understand why
Alex Volkanovski beat Max Holloway 3 times, and I give him that.
Technically, a lot of people think he only beat him twice, but that's a different. Yes. That's a different story.
Okay, but we're gonna go by official record books, and by official record books, he's beaten Max Holloway 3 times.
Okay.
And then let's see, he beat Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega. Who else? Maybe this is just me, but I'm tired of just they beat 3 guys, and then all of a sudden they're either great or they want to move up and do another freaking division, like how Islam was looking at Leon Edwards. I just clean, like if there's one thing Dano's right about, clean your fucking division first.
It's true, but my question to that would be, who else realistically does Islam have to fight other than Arman Tsarukyan? He's already beat Charles Oliveira. He's already beat Dustin Poirier. He more than likely will beat Justin Gaethje if they ever fight. Who else?
But I would like to see that fight happen.
Yeah, but Justin Gaethje only did it to himself by losing to Max Holloway, so he might never get that opportunity.
Fair enough. All right. We're going way too long on this. My point being, I like I get Dana's point. I like the idea of Islam being number 1. At this point, it goes back to what I said in that, if he had fought in November, maybe we're not having this argument.
Which I agree with. I agree with that.
And I'll take it one step further.
Okay.
I think what's going to happen is eventually we're not going to have this argument because it's stuck in my mind. I know people want to see Aspinall fight. I know people are clamoring about Pereira heavyweight. Jon Jones is going to fight Stipe Miocic in November at Madison Square Garden. He is going to dominate Stipe Miocic at Madison Square Garden, and then he's going to and then he's going to drop the gloves.
Why do you think that even though based on his tweet he thinks that there's plenty of options for him? Why are you still of the belief that he doesn't want to fight anymore after Stipe? What makes you say that?
The kind of fight that he and Stipe are going to have, the kind of fight that it's at Madison Square Garden, which he has never fought at before, despite being from New York, and it's GOAT versus heavyweight GOAT. At that point, that's peak, that's pinnacle. I think he would want to end on that note.
I don't know. I think he would be ruining his chances at one more fight, which is the fight everybody wants to see, him and Aspinall.
Well, we'll see what happens with that because Curtis Blades might have something to say with that. I doubt it. I'm picking Aspinall in that fight, but obviously Blades is going to want to interfere at that point, and Pereira might as well.
For sure. I just think no matter how you slice and dice numbers 1 through 3, you can't. Just my personal opinion. No matter who you think is 1 through 3, all their legacies at this very moment in time are set in stone. I think personally, if you really want to look at it, who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 3, they're all essentially number 1 in their own right. It's however you want to rank them.
Yeah,
that's really the whole overarching argument.
All right. So about a month or so ago, we talked about Khabib Nurmagomedov. His bank accounts were seized. Supposedly, he owes the Russian government about $3 million. And now it seems that they have officially seized all of his bank accounts.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing considering that, one time he was arguably one of the best lightweights on the planet, if not the greatest ever. And it's sad to see because he's someone that I think is, someone who cares about his moral compass. So to see this happen to him is very disappointing. I hope he and all the parties involved that are impacted by this financially are okay. It's a bummer that the Russian government is doing this. I don't think we really know the full story of what's going on. Hopefully the truth will eventually reveal itself, but you just got to hope that it's nothing serious and it's nothing that will tarnish his legacy that was essentially perfect until this news came out, and something that he was very, very insistent on that he would never fight again, given that, his parents' final wish was that he would retire once his father passed away a couple years ago. So this is really sad to see for all involved, and I just really hope he's okay.
Okay, given that you brought it up, I'll just go right to it. does this bring him back to a fight?
Could very well be the case, assuming that if this thing doesn't get resolved in the next couple of months, he might need the money that badly to get thrust back into a fight. And given everything that Conor McGregor and other rivals are saying about him, I think it could entice him very well to reconsider his initial stance that he had a couple of years ago that he would never fight again. So,
if that happens, then and you're the UFC, do you try to get that Chandler fight out of the way then, so that way when McGregor's last fight, it's McGregor Khabib too?
that's the rematch the UFC's been wanting to make for years. It's almost like it's inevitable at this point that the stars could be aligning that way. The only issue that I have, though, and you'd probably agree with me, I think that fight's lost its luster. It's not 2018 again.
Absolutely.
Either of these guys are in their prime. I'm not trying to compare it to Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz 3, but who really wants to see that when that fight was 6 years removed and they're not?
I barely even want to see the Michael Chandler fight happen right now.
I know. I don't think anybody should be talking about any potential Khabib fights until this situation is resolved. And even then, for his sake, I hope he doesn't fight again because that's what he wants. He wants to ride off into the sunset. And I just hope this is a setback. I mean, this is serious, millions of dollars. It's a serious thing, but hopefully he has people around him that can rectify this because I'm sure most of this incident, maybe even all of it, is not fully on him. To me, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would get himself in this situation, and I'm sure you'd probably agree. So,
all right. I can't believe we're near like an hour and a half into the show, but we have the other story that was supposed to be our big story. Oleksandr Usyk is undisputed no more. He is officially no longer the IBF heavyweight champion. That title will now officially be on the line September 21st in, I believe it's in Wembley. Anthony Joshua, Daniel Dubois. And apparently Usyk will maybe be there. There's still that rematch with Fury. That's going to happen supposedly in December.
December 21st is the target for that.
You've got...
Yes, Joshua versus Dubois is in
WBO,
Wembley Stadium.
Championships that are going to be on the line. So those are the three titles that I guess will be on the line. I'm sorry. I'm bringing this out now. Really, after all that Saudi Arabia does, even with the power of Saudi Arabia and the commission there, not the commission there, the whole
Turkey Al-Sheikh.
Fund. Yeah, Turkey Al-Sheikh and the fund there. Still, boxing manages to get in its own way.
Yeah, and just to answer a question that you had briefly, the fight will be taking place at Wembley, just so you know.
I like that Joshua and Dubois are fighting in Wembley, but really? He's undisputed champion for a month?
Yeah. I mean, you would think this would be a win for Joshua, but given how Joshua's looked over the last couple of years, there's no guarantees. There really isn't. Like, could you imagine the disaster that would take place if somehow Dubois won this fight? It would ruin the whole aura.
And that's the thing. I guess the advantage that all of them are looking at is that if Joshua wins, he gets the winner of Usyk Fury 2, and they re-undispute the belts, I guess, if you will, reunify
and they could finally make the fight that we've waited since 2017 to see, which is Joshua versus Fury potentially.
But like you said, one, Dubois could change all those plans up if he pulls off the upset, and number two, what happens if Fury wins the rematch in December? You'd have to go Usyk Fury 3, right?
Yeah, because it's 1-1. Absolutely, yeah. But I think personally, even though you just mentioned the thing about Saudi Arabia, this is fantastic for boxing. They have more exciting problems on their hands than they know what to do with. You and I are obviously actively talking about it. There's more and more MMA media that's starting to talk about heavyweight boxing now. To me, boxing could not be in a better place because there's bigger fight after bigger fight. Everyone's anticipating the madness to happen. This is just simply part of the story. That's all I can say.
We talked about last week about the potential, or not, pardon me, last week, a couple weeks ago, about the potential that His Excellency wants to buy all the boxing promotions. What is the role? Given the story, what do you think the role is of the alphabet organizations?
Well, for some fights, they're definitely part of it, but I would say they're outsiders. Exhibit A to that would be Fury versus Francis, in my opinion. This is one where it seems like they were involved for sure. I'm sure Saudi Arabia had some sort of a bid on it, but I'm sure that the asking price was something they probably didn't agree with, so it went to Wembley for whatever reason. But I don't know.
I wasn't talking so much about that, but in that, like we just talked about, like I just mentioned, even with the power of Saudi Arabia behind it, this, Oleksandr Usyk's undisputed reign still comes to an end after a short time because of the politics and boxing involved in the alphabet organizations. If Turkai gets his wish, could we see the end of these ranking organizations?
Yeah, and even though I'm someone that's totally against sports washing and stuff, I want to see Turkey Al-Sheikh try to go after this and see what he can do, because we need someone with uniformity, and it seems like he's doing all he can to make the fights that people want to see. He has a relationship with some of the biggest boxers in the world. He has that relationship with the UFC. It's clear that he's not, using this as a vehicle to better himself. It seems to me, and I don't know him worth anything, but it seems to me like he cares about the fighters first, and that's something that I don't think these other alphabet promoters are realizing, that the fighters are the star, the promoter is not the star. And
correct.
And I think Al-Sheikh realizes that to a full degree. The only exception that I would have to me just saying that is I think Eddie Hearn is a brilliant promoter, and I think he believes in his heart of hearts that Anthony Joshua is going to win this fight. That's his guy. That's been and his guy for years. So this is as big of a fight for Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua as it is for the potential Saudi Arabia ramifications. So this fight is bigger than people realize. I think.
Moving on, just trying to wrap up and get to the end of the show. Teofimo Lopez remains junior welterweight champion of the WBO. Decision win over Steve Claggett. It seemed like Teofimo moved around the outside, did some rope-a-dope every now and again, and basically it was the utilization of the right hand, which is probably his most dangerous weapon.
Yeah, and you have to give Claggett a lot of credit just for hanging in there and still trying to throw shots, even though he wasn't winning the majority of the rounds. He was outclassed for most of the fight, but Teofimo Lopez is one of the most exciting, not just junior welterweights, but one of the most exciting boxers in the sport. A guy that doesn't give enough credit, very similar to a Shakur Stevenson or another one of these boxers, like a Munguia or like a Ryder that maybe is not getting the respect he deserves from the mainstream audience, but the hardcore boxing community, he's one of the best in the world, and it's nice to see him get his feet back under him, and now hopefully he has more big fights in the future down the road because he greatly deserves them. So we'll see.
Going over to the PFL quickly, Brendan Loughnane got a doctor stoppage win over Justin Gonzalez in the main event of their event in Sioux Falls on June 28th. Credit to Justin Gonzalez. He wanted to go. I think he kind of knew that the doctor was going to stop the fight with the kind of cut that was on him.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly did. And Brendan Loughnane, continued his winning ways. He's already done really well this PFL season. Obviously clinched a playoff berth there and has a chance to go in another run. But this is one of those wins where kind of like what I was saying in the last segment. You get the win under you. You look great. You clearly showcase yourself as one of the best fighters in your division. And for him to get the playoff shine and the playoff push that he's going to eventually get, I'm not saying his path to a championship is easy, but he's definitely a favorite to keep an eye on. And with each passing win, he is proving Dana White every single time he fights wrong that it was one of the biggest mistakes in DWCS history for him not to be signed over.
It was a plus though for PFL.
Absolutely. And he's definitely a star that it's clear that they're trying to build around, and it'll be interesting to see if he can win another championship because he's a star in Europe that I don't think people give a lot of credit to, and he's just definitely one of those guys that's must-see TV, and he looked great in this fight. That's for sure.
And to think, he had the opportunity last season, lost, and didn't make the playoffs. And the guy who beat him in spectacular upset fashion, one of the greatest upsets last year, Jesus Pinedo, goes on to win the championship.
Yeah, it's almost like one of those things where it was destined to happen. That it was almost like a foreshadow or a next chapter, if you will, to what was going to happen later on in the season, which is very, very interesting. Was in percent and just as I alluded to, his path to the playoffs is going to be interesting, but he's definitely one of my favorites in a division that I'm keeping an eye on, and I'm sure that you're probably doing the same thing.
And then co-main event, Logan Storley in front of a hometown crowd. He took on Luka Puckwit. Luka was not supposed to be his opponent, as the show we talked about last week on episode 89. Obviously, not the two of us, but me, Pat, and the guys from Puncher's Chance. It was supposed to be Loriano Starpoli. I don't think Starpoli will be back with the PFL after, the loss and then having to drop out late notice.
I don't think so either.
I give credit to Pocklet for all that he did, but it was obviously a Logan Storley showcase. It was a showcase on his grappling and his wrestling, which may not have proven popular with the fans in attendance, but that's Logan Storley and his game.
Right, and you go in and you're supposed to be the guy like Luka Pocklet, no matter what the short notice is. He was the better fighter everywhere. That was probably one of the easiest picks of the summer so far, and it's good to see that Storley is riding the momentum that he solely deserves going into a playoff bracket that's going to be very, very challenging, to say the least, and a lot of interesting contenders on the other side. So he's also another story to watch to see if he can claim glory in a PFL season that has had, if you will, its own twists and turns aplenty. So
okay, you brought up the brackets. You have the brackets in front of you, right? Can you read them off?
Sure. So in the PFL featherweight semifinals, here are the matchups. Brendan Longnane clinched the number 1 seed. He will be taking on Kai Kamaka, and then 2 versus 3, Gabriel Braga versus Tamir Kizriev. That's the other featherweight semifinal, and then of course the winners will face off in November in the PFL tournament final for 2024. What are your early impressions of these matchups? You don't have to obviously make predictions.
Longnane versus Kamaka. Here's my impression already. Longnane versus Kamaka is going to be one of the best fights of the PFL in 2024, and I think my final is going to be Longnane versus Timur. And I would be careful if I'm Longnane, because Timur, I think, is somebody you got to really watch out for. He is a dark horse.
Yeah, he's definitely a dark horse. My early thoughts are that I think that Longnane out wrestles Kamaka, and I think Braga finishes Kizriev late, but that one I'm kind of coin flipping on anyway. Mm-hmm. And then looking over to the other PFL bracket on the welterweight side, which is very interesting in itself. You have the number 1 seed Shamil Musayev taking on Murad Ramazanov, and then we got Magomed Umawadov, the number 2 seed that is taking a match. So these 1 through 4 matchups, these 2 matchups right here, I think are 2 total coin flips. What do you think?
And the Messiah fight, that one we just saw on this past card.
Yes, he did, and that ended with a brutal first round knockout. And I just want to know, do you think that given the point standings and how things worked out and with the way the fight ended, do you think it's good that this fight is being run back right away? Because a lot of people are very mixed.
I think a lot of people had a different expectation of the fight. Like, Musayev was a great finisher, but it was undefeated versus undefeated. I think people might have wanted a little more, so I'm glad we're getting this back. That said, I still think Musayev wins it. And then you got if it's Musayev versus Don Madge, I see Musayev winning that. I don't want to say one-sided, but pretty handily. And then Musayev versus who's the number 2 seed again?
So it's Musayev versus Ramazanov.
I just need number 2.
Oh, no, number 2 is Umawadov.
That one I think has trouble, because Umawadov should have been in the postseason last season, but I believe he had issues either visa issues or injury prevented him from competing during the postseason last season. So he's somebody who, has a little fire to him.
Oh, I mean, I don't hope you've only heard me a lot, but Umawadov is fighting Madge in the first round.
No, I'm saying the 1 versus 4, I have the 1 winning.
Okay.
The 2 versus 3, the Umalata versus Madge, I'm not sure. But I see either of them losing to Smile.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I think Smile is my choice.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. We're getting very low on energy. I love you, PFL, but we got to go. Let's just go. Masvidal, Diaz, quick. Who do you favorite?
Diaz outboxes him and wins a decision. What do you think?
I guess I'm going to go with... I mean, if you want me to really be honest, I don't care. I don't care about this fight in the slightest bit.
These are two guys. Most people don't. I don't really care either, but...
I like Diaz. I like Masvidal. We don't need this fight. These are two guys who are just getting the payday. I appreciate the two of them getting the payday, and I appreciate that their fight is going to be cheaper than Jake Paul versus Mike Perry. But this fight ultimately means nothing in the long run. So,
and this fight means nothing when UFC Fight Pass is one of the pay-per-view partners airing it. So
yeah, I'll go with Diaz. I guess.
Okay. That's gonna wrap it up for episode 90 of the MMA Outsiders. Thank you again for bearing with us. A little bit of a longer episode than expected. We will try to be better on the timing in future weeks to come, as we have 10 weeks to go until episode 100. But please be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench podcast network before we get out of here. To do so, you can go to youtube.com/ETB network. We are slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers. So if you could please subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss any episodes of this show. Tough Enough, Bando's breakdowns, ETB Sports, Punchers, Chants, and so much more. You can catch all of that content there. You can listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcast, as well as if you have YouTube Premium, you can still listen to the audio-only versions. And if you are listening to the audio-only version of this podcast, be sure to do the inverse of that and come back to our YouTube home. And also, just as a final plug, be sure to check out etbpodcast.com for more great blogs on the NFL and NBA off seasons and so much more, as we are slowly but surely getting closer and closer to both college football and NFL season. And of course, we just want to remind you one last time that this show is presented by Playback. Just wanted to give them one more shout out with all the great work we've been able to do for them. And of course, you can go to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our off-season live stream schedule. I think we're done. We're both tired. This has been episode 90. We will see you guys later for episode 91 when more news will hopefully break. We have no idea what the heck that's going to be. But until then, I'm Zain. He's Tom, and we'll see you guys next week for episode 91. Take care.
Shama. I'm done. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you next week. Have a good one.